I can understand sympathy versus empathy to a degree, but where did you see this concept or develop this concept? And then let's go kind of deep into tactical empathy and how that can help me get more contracts.
I can tell you what a seller's problem is within the first 5 minutes of a phone call. I don't even know what list it is or anything. I can tell you what's going on with their lives and what questions to ask.
If somebody comes in off the street and they're like, dude, I was a monster at insurance sales and I've done everything except for REI, but I'm a closer, bro, and you see something in him, where are you starting him on that journey for anybody who's new out there to be able to start closing deals?
I'll be honest though, when I get those guys who've been in those other industries, it always makes me a little bit nervous because for me with wholesale real estate, it's kind of like a reverse psychology because in insurance, you're pushing a product. Those vacuum cleaners, they're telling you how the vacuum works. You're doing Cutco knives, they're showing you the knives.
Were you nervous or anxious at all?
I was terrified, man.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Leads to Deals podcast, where we talk about everything from leads to deals and everything we talk about leads to deals. Who's this podcast for? It's for you, my listeners that are looking to better their lives, better their financial situation, and master the art of communication through sales and entrepreneurship to become a multi-millionaire many times over. I know you're going to find tremendous value in today's podcast, but here's how you show me and my guest appreciation. You subscribe, you like, you comment, and most importantly, you share so that way we can get our message out there to other guys and gals just like you. Now, today's episode is proudly sponsored by SynergyData.io. It is the industry's best real estate data company out there. Whether you're an investor, a wholesaler, a mortgage finance company, or even a sales team, go to SynergyData.io. It's $199 a month. That's the promotion that they're running right now, and it's 10,000 motivated sellers a month. You can even do cool things like pulling credit reports, checking open credit lines to make sure you are targeting the most motivated sellers. Now, in today's episode, I'm super excited. I think he's actually my first guest I've ever had back on twice, and it was many years ago. So I'm super excited to him. Not only is somebody I consider to be a strategic partner in this industry, he's the brain behind a very successful wholesaling investing operation in Central Florida, one of the tougher markets in the nation, specializes in acquiring off-market deals nationwide and connecting with investors in their next community or in their next deal. He has an amazing community where he teaches the raw sales tactics that he knows that he's mastered to be able to bring value. And with all that being said, I proudly and humbly welcome Q the Closer, Anthony Quezada, onto the Leads to Deals podcast, brother. Thanks for coming out.
Oh, appreciate it. What an intro. Love it. Yeah, excited to be back, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, we were just talking offline, and we were just talking about Moana before we came on. and so we both got kids, and we're both savage entrepreneurs. So I want to start there, man, because me and you know each other from the business standpoint, but maybe not too much on the personal side. A day like today, right? Like it's Friday. You guys have had a long week, I'm sure, in your sales office. What's that work-life balance look like for you right now, for everybody who's thinking like, hey, what do I want in my life, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, man, I've come from a very traditional family. So growing up, my mom always worked at basic banker jobs. So she was able to take us to school, pick us up after school. But my father only had one day off, which was every Sunday. And besides that, like I saw him maybe in the morning, then he was gone till late at night before we were going to bed. So my dad was always like kind of a grinder, even though he worked for companies like Disney and stuff like that, like very traditional, like save your money, go to school kind of job. My wife kind of has the same thing. I talked to somebody the other day, actually before this meeting as well, that kind of my wife's kind of the same way. She cooks for me, she cleans for me. She's very traditional as well, even though she'll kick my butt at some times. We kind of run that household. My wife is fortunate enough that she's a stay-at-home mother. She used to be a nurse. And then I was able to almost retire her from that job because it just didn't make sense. I'd rather her spend time with my daughter. And so luckily, I'm fortunate enough to have my wife help with our daughter full time. And then, work-life balance. Obviously, I try to make it work, but my wife understands there's a responsibility for the household as the breadwinner to make sure I support my family as well. And luckily, being at the stage now of an owner of a company, I have a little bit more flexibility, but I'm here grinding away pretty much most of the time.
Yeah, we got a lot of young listeners and stuff, and a lot of guys out there debating marriage and all these other things. And I remember like my very first sales mentor, his name was Ray Rickert. And one of his things before he like took me under his wing, he just wanted to know, like, are you dating anybody right now? And I was like, no. He was like, perfect. He was like, I'm going to turn you into a sales animal because I don't want you distracted with anything other than this objective right here, which is to master my sales training and then effectively become a beast. But what he really, the opposite side is, it's like finding a good partner and finding somebody who understands and it's not even just traditional roles. It's a yin and a yang. It doesn't matter who has that primary and who has that secondary, but I tell people all the time, dude, I got 160 some employees here. It is harder to manage my household with two beautiful girls, a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old, than it is to run a 165 person sales team. It's so much harder being a parent than it is doing this.
Yeah, my wife's job's harder than mine, for sure. 100%. And we're girl dads too, so it's, we come home with softies. So
yeah, God, dude. Today, my oldest, which is the sweetest, she hit the nanny. And so I don't got the full story yet, but I got a video full of crying baby talking about I can't go to summer camp now because of X, Y, and Z. So,
but we all know they're innocent.
Yeah, well, that's what I was like. Well, how hard did she hit her? And then that's evidently not the question you're supposed to ask.
I know,
and I was like, but why? Because my baby doesn't hit anybody unless she was provoked. Yeah. So what did the nanny do? And et cetera, et cetera. So anyways, neither here nor there. So I'm really proud of where you're at today. I know that I've looked in your bio and I know you kind of offline beyond this, but your entire entrepreneurial pursuit, both as an employee or a partner and then the owners, but has been almost all sales and almost all REI, but it really wasn't the beginning of your like making money journey. You did like work restaurants and some other stuff. Tell us like what you were doing before sales.
Yeah, man. I've been doing this for so long. Sometimes I wish I had that cool story, that crazy background. Before I got into wholesale, I worked at a restaurant called Roy's. It's a Hawaiian fusion restaurant, shut down after COVID, but it's kind of where all my buddies' friends and even my brother's friends worked. And it was like a local hangout spot for all of us. Made good money. I was an SA, which is like a server assistant. So I just had grunt work where I was cleaning up tables and, the waiters are making technically more money than me and they tipped me out at the end of the night. So I was doing that. And before that, I was like an after school like coach. So like I did like after school sports for like this Catholic school. And it was like football, flag football, volleyball, stuff like that. And I just did that. And that was it. Because I got in this industry like right at 17. It was like my senior year.
No shit.
Yeah,
okay, I did not know it was that young. I thought you were a server first at Roy's.
You had to be 18. You had to be 18, but I got in at 17 because my brother's friends worked there, so I was able to get a job. Yeah.
Wow. You know what? In my sales career, when I started off, I was really blessed that I was 2021. And so like I had a really long journey in sales still. It's been 2 decades now for myself. But one of the things I loved is how naive I was to the world because I just gobbled up anything. You told me I could go out there and close this guy for $40,000. I was too dumb, too naive. You told me this crazy sales tactic. I wasn't going to talk back twice. I just went through it. And I got to imagine it's kind of like the same thing at 17 too. You're so hungry and you're so young and dumb. You're like, okay, whatever you say, I'll go knock on the door and say this.
Yeah, well, actually, I got a little bit it was probably a better blessing. Is in 17, I got thrown into the wholesale world by doing admin work. So like my brother was doing the sales. I was doing grunt work. He's like, you're already doing grunt work for somebody else. Do the grunt work for me, which I think was the turning point for my brother and I once we left that company because I knew how to do all the background stuff. So we were there for like a year and a half. He was already there for 3 years when we left. And I learned how to do all the admin stuff, all the back end stuff. I knew all the data sets, the softwares, the systems, how to set things up. So that way, when we finally left to do it ourselves, I had all the back end. So I was my brother's support system. And then it was finally following him on appointments, seeing what he was doing. He's like, I can't make all the money. You guys start making money. So then that's kind of how the sales journey began, was through my brother.
Do you think in the beginning it was, hey, I'm going to take away some of my money and give it to you? Or by plugging you in, was it able to expand? Because like you said, you got to start making some money.
Yeah. So I was like a small salary for that one company. And he was just like, I'll pay you that same thing. He's like, we have some money when we left, but he's like, I'll pay you the same thing. But he's like, if we close deals, I'll give you a percentage. So and that kind of incentivized him. Before, obviously, it started off, I was doing all the grunt work. I got a smaller percentage. And as we grew, we had to elevate. We're getting deals. Now that I had to do dispo, we got deals. And now I do acquisitions, we get more deals. And now we're spending money on marketing. So it kind of just grew into a role. And this whole journey for me every year is a level up.
Yeah. Do you think that you look back at yourself when you were, I guess, 18, 19? How old were you when you and your brother left that first investor's office that you were working under?
I was probably 19 at the time. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So 19, when you were 19, did you ever think like, hey, I'm going to do the client facing stuff? Or were you just so on the support roles, the admin roles, the dispo roles?
Well, you know my brother Alex. I was admin role in the beginning. He was the kind of the guy that he didn't want to let go of anything. He knew what he knew. So he was grinding his face off. And I was just the one right there picking up all the pieces to make sure that packets are met, realtors were talked to, things are in place. Like I was TC, I was admin, I was his personal assistant. Yep. Like I did all the grunt work until he realized, he was like, we need to do more. And you're the only person that's working with me. So,
yep. Yeah. But did you envision yourself being able to talk to people? Did you think, were you nervous or anxious at all?
I was terrified, man. We lived together. So my senior year, at the end of my senior year, I moved in with my brother. So I ended up living with him, and we had this small little house on the lake. Love that house to death. It was like 800 square foot house. I was behind the couch and he was in front of the TV, and I listened to him grind all day. It was very intimidating because I just came out of high school. I didn't know anything and barely had real jobs. And then listening to him kind of grind, I was like, man, he's like, sometimes he's very aggressive. I seen him throw chairs. I seen deals fall apart. It's thousands of dollars. And I don't think it was like the conversations he was having. It was just like, how do you handle that? Like, how do you handle that much money all the time, being responsible for things, always having your phone? And I think that was the mindset. And then of course, once I started talking to sellers, when you talk to sales, you just like, why would this person sell me a house? Like I still remember going on my first appointment. I still had some hair at that time, but it's like, I had a beat up Mazda that I had since my junior year. It was like champagne gold, had a spoiler. And I'm 20 years old convincing a homeowner who's, in their 50s, like to sell me their house. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Like, why would they do that? Like, it was so much stuff in my brain that I was like, no one would ever do this.
Yeah. It's almost a bit of imposter syndrome too, right? Because you need confidence to be able to communicate. Sure. The kid that I had on my podcast earlier, his very first sale, he was like, I didn't understand it so good or whatever, that he brought his cash buyer with him to the table. And so he was like, okay, so I brought my cash buyer, and we went to this guy's house, and he said, and the guy's wearing a robe. That's it. He's wearing a robe, big guy. And he sits down at the table, and he didn't have enough command over the sales presentation to even get the guy to sit down. So he's like, I'm sitting here at the table, and I'm looking up at this guy with his arms crossed in his robe, angrily looking down. And the guy just turns to him and says, get out. He was like, essentially he saw that like, you're not a cash, you're not this, you're not. So did you have anything crazy in your beginning, like sales journey, where you're like, oh yeah, I deserve that. I deserve to get kicked out or lose that deal? I've
personally actually never been kicked out of a house. I definitely had people rush me. Like I've definitely noticed people rush me pitches, but I've actually had more horror stories about the clients themselves, that when I showed up to houses, the confidence rose. Cause I'm like, what are you living in? Like, what is this house? Like there's one lady, I'll never forget a story I always tell, is we go to this house and she tries to offer me, she's like, do you want a drink? She's like, you want alcohol? And I was like, nah, I'm good. She goes, well, I'm going to get us a drink anyway. She brings like a bottle of like Tito's or like Bacardi, like clear liquor. She lifts it up. It's brown. There's roaches in there. She grabbed it from the kitchen floor. The sink hasn't been cleaned for maybe 6 months. She then asked, my brother was on this appointment as well because I went with him. She's like, well, I'll sell you the house, but you got to help me move my fridge outside. The fridge had Scotch tape on the handles. Me and my brother tried to lift it. A little bit opens. Dude, I would probably say leeches, flies, roaches just bum rushed us because the door opened this much. The nastiest, I still smell it to this day. And I think at that point, I realized that it's like, these sellers, yes, they're always going to get an arrogant asshole, but like these people are crazy. Like they're nuts. Like most of them are afraid to even open their door to us. Then I was like, my bedroom's clean. Like I just made my bed. Like I'm talking to you. Like you need me to be here.
Yeah, it's so funny. I love the way you said that. I had that talk with the team this week. I said, selling is conviction, right? And so if you don't believe in your product, it's hard to communicate. And so I would just tell everybody, whatever you're going to sell, if you're going to go into sales, make sure you believe in it. Find a way to really, really believe in it. And that'll cover 40% of your presentation. And I said, the reason why some of you agents on here, particularly newer agents, are giving up on some of these tougher customers who are giving you these objections is you don't really believe or appreciate in the outcome. And so then what I made the disposition guy who I said, hey, I want you to take the last 10 deals that we dispoed out of this office. I want you to drop the photo link into the real estate chat. And I need you agents to understand what we're actually doing to transform these people's lives. These houses are shit. Their lives are shit. Their entire day to day is got this cloud over them. So if I really believe, I'm going to put up with something to help that person accomplish what it is that we need.
Yeah, people will shock you, and especially now doing virtual sales. Like as soon as we get a bad link, I literally tell the closer and I go, "What did she tell you?" She's like, "Oh, the house was, it's a little beat up. It needs some love." And we just sold one in Daytona this morning, and hoarder house. Like I'm talking about, she has every lunch she's probably had the last 3 years stacked in a garbage in the corner of her kitchen, and she can't even walk in the kitchen without touching trash. And don't get me wrong, we get regular sellers that are not that crazy, but I think now in this industry, like I can kind of identify everybody's issues relatively quickly, and they all have the same problem. They need help.
I don't know exactly how this ties in, but I used to sell timeshare way back in the day. That's where I got my fundamentals. And then one time I went to Westgate Lakes, and this was like when I'm like rolling in cheddar. I'm a hog high. I go into that place and I wanted to get the real deal. So I put on like my Louis gear and I was dressed out to the nine. I looked and smelled like $1 million. I was kicked out within like 12 minutes. Because they were like, guys like you don't buy this. And I was like, oh, yeah, exactly, right? Because their customer are the places when they see these timeshare resorts, they like, oh, I don't have anything like this. Oh, how nice would it be? Not like, hey, this resort is shittier than my house. So it's almost the same. It's almost the same thing with here. It's like, hey, listen, you think that, I'm a phone agent and I don't make but X amount. This guy's got to be wealthier than me. They got to have better. No, bro, your life's actually better than the people you're talking to for the most part.
Yeah. Some of them can't even afford their mortgage payments.
Which is crazy right now. What's so mind blowing? And then we'll go back to your sales. But I'm starting to get this I saw a video on either TikTok or X actually. And this girl says it's an older lady. She's probably like my age, right? And she's talking to her father who's got to be in his 70s. And she says, Papa, do you know how much your house is worth? And he's like, and he's pants all the way up to almost his boobs and stuff. And he's like, oh, no, honey, I don't know. She said, Papa, do you remember how much you paid for this house? He said, I paid $39,000. And he said, but now, Papa, do you remember how much do you think it's worth? He goes, well, maybe about 60. And she says, Papa, it's worth $440,000. He said, oh, you're going to give me a heart attack. and the point is, and then she was like, now, Papa, you could sell this and move in with me. And you could, and it's just like, there's so many people out there who can't make their mortgage payments, right? Yep. Or they have credit card debt out the eyeballs right now. And they're sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, but that chapter, that corner of their brain is not opening up to like, oh, I should stop paying 25% credit cards and I should stop worrying about my mortgage payment that I can't make when I have $400,000 in equity. Like, it's crazy right now.
Yeah, I mean, financial literacy is what kills everybody, honestly. So even the youngers, the boomers, they're stuck in their ways. But I think even like I have some younger guys in my office too, but it's like financial literacy is never taught to people. Guys crazy. Like my brother who teaches people like how to, buy houses and build portfolios. Like there's people who just don't think that way. They'd rather have a free and clear mortgage and be rolling in debt than try to fix their lives.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It's crazy. So, all right, so let's go back into it. So you're doing sales and I've known you, for a good chunk of years now. But I don't know if I've ever seen anybody in any industry, and I mean this with love, not only get good at sales so well, but get good at leading sales teams. And it's safe to say that based off of this, you really didn't work for any other companies. And do you think it came natural? Did you study behind the scenes? Was it just replication and observation?
If you ask my wife, this journey has been a little bit crazy. Because technically my brother was my boss. And when you have your brother your boss, there's no HR. There's no policies. My brother talked to me like a brother. And if you did something dumb, you did something dumb. And I'm not going to go into all profanity in it, but we butt heads a lot. But the thing is like when we first started hiring people, I actually found out there was like a little switch, and I'm going to throw Alex under the bus a little bit, which was like he had trouble kind of delegating, and he also had trouble with firing people. So I was kind of like, I got put to be like the bad guy sometimes because we were trial and error. Some people first we hired an assistant, that assistant didn't work out. And he's like, oh, but she's young and she's got this and her mom. And I'm just like, bro, we're not making money. Like we got to let her go. So I ended up obviously slowly training these people, but like their first hire was an acquisition agent assistant, then acquisitions. But when we bought the acquisition guy in, I was doing cold calling with him. And then what happens, like it started working, we started getting deals. And then we're like, well, let's get another one. So we got another one. That's my guy, Joel's been with me for 5 years. We got another one. And now my lead role came. Now it was like, Anthony, you know what to say because you've been on the phone longer, but now you got to make sure they're doing it. So I'm like, okay, like I could do that. But then the management kind of slowly trickled in, and then it was like we hired a dispo, then we hired another guy, then we got a call center, and we got cold callers and all this stuff where it kind of grew. And then it was a learning curve. I was the nice guy. I was the nice guy that, hey, yeah, I had a day off. It's cool. I understand. But now my wife told me a couple of months ago, she goes, from the beginning with your employees to now, she says, and I'm going to get this tattooed on my forehead. It's so great. She goes, you're kind, but you're not nice. I was like, man, I was like, I hate that you said it, but I think it describes me perfectly. Because I feel like I'm a good boss, but I just don't have time for bullshit.
Boy, I love that. That's almost like a great name of a book too. Kind, but not nice.
Not nice.
But that's what you really look for in a mentor, and that's what you really need in a coach. And so one of the things I'm really big on is dream team. I don't want to just build a team. I want to build a dream team. And, you know, our time on earth and as entrepreneurs and in any market cycle, it's always limited. And so it's like you have to be able to maximize that opportunity that's at hand there. And I see what you've done with your sales guys, but it's interesting. Do you think that your brother comparatively is still struggles to fire people as much? Has he kind of shifted, or is that kind of fall on you?
Well, now that we've kind of had like a little separate parts of our businesses, it still drives me crazy to do it. He'll do it now. It's not his favorite job. Yeah. For me, I don't get me wrong. I'll get butterflies anyways, because we try to build a strong culture, very family oriented kind of culture. So it still sucks. I fired a guy 2 days ago. It's not what I want to do, but unfortunately it's got to rip the Band-Aid off, you know?
Yeah. It's one of those things too. It's for the greater good of everybody's, because sometimes if you don't fire that one person, you may have to let go of everybody. Correct. And so, you know, those cancers, it can happen. And I'm not saying that was your particular situation. So, okay, cool. So you've been in it for a while. I know that you guys have really mastered a lot of the different exit strategies. And I think that that's something to be really proud of, but also different marketing channels, et cetera. Yeah. When I think of a guy like you who has to teach a team and do all those types of things, let's just start with fundamentals. What's the first thing that you're if somebody comes in off the street and they're like, dude, I was a monster at insurance sales and I've done everything except for REI, but I'm a closer, bro. And you see something in him. Where are you starting him on that journey for anybody who's new out there to be able to start closing deals?
Yeah. I'll be honest though. When I get those guys who've been in those under industries, it always makes me a little bit nervous, because for me with wholesale real estate, it's kind of like a reverse psychology, because in insurance, you're pushing a product. Those vacuum cleaners, they're telling you how the vacuum works. You're doing Cutco knives, they're showing you the knives. Car sales, you're coming in for a product to push a product. Yep. Here, I'm asking you to sell me your house. So it's a little bit of a switch of a difference. Like we're really like pushing on emotions. We're pushing on feelings. We're trying to build urgency. We're trying to use a scarcity mindset, because again, we're attacking people with distress lists. So when these guys come in, I do have a trainual kind of program, and it's like a closer school. So a lot of it is from stuff I've done where they go over our wireframes. They have to have the basic understanding of what we do, what is wholesale, what's an investor, what's an assignment, the clientele that we look for. Some of them will even show them pictures of these houses. Like we try to tell them, like, it's like HGTV. We're buying the ugly. We're the middleman. We're going to sell them to the guys who are going to make them pretty. So they go through like a module where they learn what's called our A to Z process. So they learn how to build rapport, qualify clients, build value, become an expert in the field, and then obviously assuming the sale. So a lot of the sales fundamental is in what we do. And we kind of use the car salesman approach about like putting people on hold, talking to the finance department and stuff like that. But then what I mainly teach is about like really going into empathy. Like empathy for me in our office is the life cycle of our sales process.
So it's one of the things that I have, and or I've written down, excuse me, Anthony, and it's tactical empathy. And I know that this is this thing that you train, and it's like, I've seen your sales career enough. I'm like, where the hell did that come from? Not that it's not a thing, but it's like, it's something that I believe I'd never heard anywhere else except really from you. Like, I understand sympathy versus empathy to a degree, but where did you see this concept or develop this concept? And then let's go kind of deep into tactical empathy and how that can help me get more contracts.
Yeah. So there's this one guy, I forgot what his name is, but he's one of like the gurus in the industry. He talks about like people's superpowers. And I was like, my superpower in this industry is I've talked to every seller under the sun. I can tell you what a seller's problem is within the first 5 minutes of a phone call. I don't even know what list it is or anything. I could tell you what's going on with their lives and what questions to ask. And I think that's the most difficult part about this industry, is that in the beginning, people taught us like 7-minute pitches, go fast, guerrilla model. But for me, it was like, dude, I've talked to Susie who can't pay her bills 1,000 times. I've talked to the guy who's gone through probate, doesn't know what to do, doesn't get along with his sister. I've talked to the guys who are going through a divorce and all this stuff. But the question is so many people get on these phone calls and they have these high motivation lists, but they never go deeper. Like what's crazy to me is even for the sales guys, we do a lot of call recordings when someone's new. You hear people openly over the phone talk to a stranger and tell them like, my wife just died. And the damn kid's like, I'm so sorry, Scott. How old's the roof though? And I'm like, dude, bro,
throw a chair right there. It's crazy.
And I'm like, and I get it. So like sympathy, like you're apologizing. Like, hey, I feel bad for you. That sucks, man. Like tell me more, whatever. But empathy is like, I would need you to tactfully be in that mindset. You're married. You lost a loved one. What the hell are you going through? Because the real question is, how does she pass? Yeah. And if people are listening to this live, like they're gonna be like, why the hell would I ask that? Well, you have to, because you're the only person who's going to ask that. And then you're the only person who's going to pull real emotion out. So I focus on like, I need you to be in their shoes. What do you think he's actually going through? And what does he really care about? So I use the example for probate a lot. But I tell my guys, I go, imagine your wife died. What are you going through? Like, I just told you my wife runs my household. What the hell would I do? I now got to take care of my daughter. I got to feed. I got to cook. I got to clean. I can't manage that. My world would be shut. But so is everybody else's. So why aren't we asking those questions? Let's ask the real questions. So that way this guy can now understand it, feel pain. I can now create urgency, but also figure out what his real issues. Like, he's probably going to go somewhere. He's probably retirement home, children. He's got to move somewhere. Most of the time their house is too big. They don't even want to be in the house because they don't want to sleep in the bed because their partner's missing. Yeah. So
I know it sounds bad what I'm going to say, but it has a reason. When I was doing face-to-face sales for all those years, high ticket, I liked, and I don't know if that's the appropriate word, but I liked people who said that they're had just been diagnosed with cancer or they had just lost a spouse. And the reason why is because I knew it was going to be an emotionally charged conversation. Sure. And we were going to be able to make some level of friendship. Like when somebody's going through something, even if they don't buy, when somebody's going through them, they're way more open to being open. They want an ear. They want to have somebody to literally give them a virtual hug, if you will, et cetera. And so when I get that same scenario here, I'm like, dude, what if your aunt just told you her husband died? Would you literally just move on to the next subject? Or you'd be like, oh my gosh, how many years were you? Oh, what happened? And it's like these people are constantly hearing these things and they don't ask those second or third level questions. Yeah. So with tactical empathy, is it more like additional discovery, or what are you doing with that discovery to let them know that I am truly empathetic?
Yeah. So we just really dive deep into what the heck is going on in their lives. So my mom's Cuban. So every time my mom is on the phone and she talks to a relative, she'll let out a gasp and she's like, oh my God. And I'm looking at her, I'm like, what the hell happened? Who died? And it's like the smallest little thing. So we build that kind of rapport, but like, I need this guy to have feelings of me. So like, if he tells me his wife, let's say she died a month ago from cancer, I have to go in deeper questions. Cause again, most people will, even if they ask that question and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I need to go, who's managing the household? Yeah. Are you able to keep up the maintenance? No, I can't. Boom. So I know he has to there's a level to this where he has to move on. Cool. Do you have family that's like close by, Scott? Like, do you have kids, relatives? He's like, well, I got a couple hours away. Man, Scott, like, if you did sell the house, like, where would you go? Do you want to live with the kids? Well, I prefer not to. They bother me and, and they got their own kids. And I go, so in a perfect situation, what would you do? He's like, well, yeah, I probably would have to move in. And I go, okay. So now for me, my mindset is, well, now there's another party involved. So like, he can't sell his house until he talks to his kid. So what am I going to do as a professional later on in this conversation is I'm going to try to bring the kids into it. Because I know he could say he wants $1 for that house. He will not sign that contract until his kid says, all right, Dad, come on in. Yeah. So it's like tactical empathy allows me to roadmap their lives, but then now I can also build ammo in my gun to later come back to, because I need to know the hurdles of what they're going through. So that way I can later reflect on that and future pace them to show him how that end of the rainbow looks like for him.
Yeah. It's so amazing when you watch somebody grab like paint and start painting. And it's like Bob Ross. Bob Ross will just be like, we're going to add a little tree right here and do this. And he doesn't really go too deep. But if you play it back, if you play what you just did back, somebody hit pause, go back and play that over. The power pause and the voice inflection and the way your tonality, When you were just saying that as a third party story about what you would do, you're so self-trained in the way you communicated that. Cause that's the other problem is people are like, well, I've asked somebody else about how their spouse passed and they got angry at me and said, it's none of my business.
Yeah.
Well, it's because you asked it the same way you asked about how old is the air conditioner. How about just pausing and, let me ask. And people don't understand the power of that voice inflection with real communication. So if I'm gathering like tactical empathy is really an emotional questioning and listening really well in the same way that you would do it if it was like your best friend who was going through a life event.
100%. Yeah. Childlike tone is kind of how I describe it. I listened to Alex Trebozzi the other day. He calls it a ghetto tone because he trains people at the gym. So he tells them, like, if you're working with this big lady and you're telling her to put the weights back, he's like, you can't just tell Linda, hey, Linda, re-rack your weights. She's going to be like, I'm paying you to train. He goes, Linda, I know you ain't going to leave those weights there. And she's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's fine. But like tonality is really changes the conversation. Yeah, it's everything to sales. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. All right. So one of the things that I really appreciate about what your sales process is, and it's what you guys have done, and you've done it through market shifts, and I believe you guys are shifting some here and there as well too, but you're doing primarily virtual.
Yep.
And one of the things that I was having this conversation with somebody today, he's a guru, they got their school and all this other stuff. And we were talking about how people fail in this industry, which I never saw you guys go through, but how people fail in this industry of getting contracts signed. And so when I first met this entire vertical, I said, here's two things that everybody does that I couldn't understand. They talk about projected profit. So the first thing was like, oh, dude, I got a $50,000 deal today. I'm like, okay. But then I realized, oh, that's projected profit. But then you would ask another question and then you'd be like, well, no, they didn't sign the contract. It's like, wait a minute. So you didn't even get a contract. You just got somebody who said, send me a contract. Yep. So because I want to offer strategic advice, we talked about how to have like really good discovery, et cetera. But once you've done that discovery and you've positioned the offer and you've made that offer and there is that, like, how are you guys sending out contracts and having so many of them return signed?
Yeah. So once even before we give them like a final offer, whether we know it works or not, we always do a tie down close. So we're always asking them before we even make an offer, if this is something that makes sense to you today, would you be ready to go today? And if they say yes, then we'll present an offer and go. But most of the time, a lot of clients will say no. And typically that's when we do some rediscovery. There's something along this sales process that we didn't uncover that we still need to figure out, that we need to ask them, hey, what would be holding you back? So like, hey, Scott, even if we got you $1 million, they came back. How come you wouldn't sign today? Well, I got to talk to my wife and I got to line this up. Well, guess what I'm not going to do on this phone call? I'm not going to give you an offer. Exactly. I'm going to say, let's get your wife on the phone. Let's do this. I'm going to navigate those objections. So that way, now I can start closing you once all your dilemmas and issues have been solved. So that way, before I tie you down, you say, hey, yes, if all this happens, I'd be ready to go.
So I'm going to pause you right there because I think it's really important. So the first thing to do to get more contracts signed is stop sending out contracts to people before it's time to send out contracts. Yeah. Because I watch people go into this emotional cliffhanger at this industry and they're like, bro, I don't understand, man. I sent out 20 agreements. It's like, bro, you didn't even trial close. You didn't, even really position off. You did nothing, and you just sent it out hoping that you'll get deals back in. And that may have worked a year ago to at least be like 1 out of 30 signs, vague contracts, but it's definitely not going to work today. And so I would just really appreciate that. It's like, hey, man, my number one tactic is to stop sending out contracts to people who don't deserve a contract yet.
Yeah, and I think it's also a little bit more, I talk about this in my school community, it was actually on Tuesday ones, is that I think some of the biggest fear for people is that they don't understand the contracts. So especially with newbies, they just get a contract from online, they follow a guru and they say, oh, here's my free contract that I use, but they don't actually even know what the lingo is on the contract. Like when my sales guys come, the last step before they start talking to sellers is, okay, if you got a deal, you have to walk them through the contract. Like you have to understand the words that you're going to say. I don't want you reading the words. I don't want you to read section 1, closing costs. Buyer will pay all closing costs related to title fees. No, there's a sizzle to the contract. And I always use the example of the car dealership. Every time anybody buys a car, whether it's used or new, you go see the finance guy to get your final numbers. Dude, that stack of papers like this, bro. Nobody listening to this knows what's on those papers. Nobody. Nobody's ever reviewed that. But that guy's so smooth with it. He's just flipping and you're signing like nothing because he's the guy with the knowledge. He understands what's on that agreement. It's what makes sellers comfortable. So I don't care if you're using a 15-page contract or a 3-page contract like us. If you know it, it makes people feel comfortable.
That's a really good point too. And so if you're not there, like this is what I tell people all the time. Like I'm blessed enough to have a really amazing executive assistant. I get so sidetracked with stuff that she sends me. Like I'll have something, and then if it wasn't for her being like, hey, did you sign that agreement? Hey, did you do this? Hey, did you do that? So it's like, you're going to send a contract to somebody who's never seen these verbiages, this paragraphs before, and hope that their kid's not going to walk in the room while they're on paragraph 1. Or the worst case, these DocuSign contracts now, I said this earlier today, but they have that little button where it's like, by clicking here to view this document, you agree to You know how many people that have sent out contracts in this industry that the customer never even saw the document because like, ooh, no, that's scary.
They think you're going to sign right away.
No, not going to click that. So it's crazy what people, the small little mistakes that you can make after giving a good presentation to even get a contract signed or not signed.
Even if you don't know the agreements, I recommend people because we used to do this in the beginning, even when I started out, was like, we used to just tell them like, hey, we want to make sure they got it and DocuSign said viewed, that we would wait on the phone in the beginning and we're like, hey, did you view it? Let me know when you have a chance to review it. And if you have any questions, like even doing the bare minimum where you're there and they're reading it helps more than just sending it out.
Yeah, I agree. And it also helps your KPIs a lot better too, because I think for everybody in this industry who's in the REI space, listen, you can't improve what you don't inspect. And so if you truly don't know how many leads to an offer and then how many offers to a contract and then how many contracts to sign contracts, you got to at least find a way to be able to go back and track those records when you have some sort of a problem out there. So, all right. So really good advice on that. In regards to being virtual though, what's some of your advice on building credibility in other markets when you're talking to a seller who clearly knows you're not there? Because you guys are in Orlando and occasionally you'll do deals in other states. What are you doing to build credibility to make them not go with that local guy?
So it will depend based on if I give this as an avatar to someone who's new, it will change a lot. For us, we use it that we actually do it 2 ways for 2 different kinds of competitions. When we're facing the local guy, I act like I'm Zillow. The local guy is great, Scott, but for us is like, do you want the local guy who has to scrounge up some money and hopefully gets you to closing? Or you want the company that will always answer, that's open 24/7, that can get the job done, that there's professionals going. So that's kind of how we diversify a little bit as we show as like, even though we're family owned, it's corporate. There's no balls are dropped. Now, the other way is if they have offers from OfferPad and everything else like that, we kind of reverse it. Where it's like, hey, do you want these guys who are you're just another book in their profile? Like they don't care about you. They don't know your name. Or do you want the guys that are there to help you and walk you through it and hold your hand? So we use both tactics. But yes, on the out-of-state markets, we try to establish ourselves as a well-oiled machine that doesn't drop the ball, doesn't have to worry about financing, that even if something happens with us on one day, we have 20 other people who can handle your stuff.
And what I encourage people to do out there is to actually, and it is what it is. People are going to do it to you, so don't hold back on doing it to others. But you should go through people's pitches. You should call some local guys. If you're going virtual into, I don't know, I'll just pick Indianapolis. Go fill out some forms on some wholesalers out there because you're going to be super relieved at the quality of those conversations. And as Kent Clothier says, you can count on your competition's mediocrity. But you're also going to realize that a lot of your credibility, especially from a sales organization like yours, comes from the quality of conversation that you're having. And so once you realize like these other guys and gals, for the most part in this industry, and obviously there's some titans out there, but 90% of this industry, your guys' industry, is hobbyists. And they're not really communication professionals. And so that leaves the door open for somebody to come into one of these hick towns or smaller towns and really dominate because you guys can have quality conversations.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree more. Everything is based on, being virtual, they can't see us. So it's a performance. It's, we call it a theater act. Like people see Wolf of Wall Street. Unfortunately, sometimes people hate that stigma of Wolf of Wall Street, but that is the emotional roller coaster we have to build with our clients.
Yeah. And listen, people who crap or go poo-poo on scripts and stuff like that, as a buddy, you said Wolf of Wall Street. That whole movie was done off of a script and a wireframe. And there were some ad-lib parts here and there, but best believe a lot of money was spent talking about camera angle A, light out B. I mean, all that stuff that goes into a well-oiled production. And so I think there's an opportunity in your guys' vertical to continue to have real operators who are going through the highs and lows. Like every month's not a good month, but if you're out there on the streets, and this is, I think, the thing that's so complex about this, when I see guys like you, Anthony, and I say this with love, if I could bottle you up and make you a full-time coach and give the exposure necessary, I would, but it's very hard to be able to do that and run the business as well too, because there's very few people out there who are actually doing both to the capacity that you are. Like, you have a great school community, but you're also running a business. And so that level of authenticity, honest to God, it's not happening out here in this industry. I know guys that had a great 6-month sprint and then now they're coaching, but they're not actually doing deals nowadays.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I think everybody has that stigma on gurus. Like, I follow those accounts like Baller Busters and all that stuff. All those gurus, they do that. They tell you what they did do, how they did it, but they're not actively doing it. So for us, I had one guy that who wanted to join, had questions, but that's always my number one thing is like, come to my office, I'm doing it. Like, I actually know what you're going through. When you're looking for marketing channels, I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing new marketing. I'm trying different direct mail ads. I'm cold calling as well. Like, there's no like, hey, this worked for me before. I used to crush it off this list. It's like, oh, great. You sold during the hedge fund and you sold your company. Awesome. But like, what did you do when everything switched? What'd you do when the interest rates went to 7%? What'd you do after South Carolina said novations are dead? You can't wholesale here. Like, those are the stuff that those guys can't teach you. Like, sure, they'll get advice from somebody, but they're not going to tell you how to navigate it. I knew guys in South Carolina who had 10 deals under contract and they're like, what the hell do I do now? How do I get around it? So it's like, those are the things that those other guys can't teach you. They'll tell you the things that worked, and don't get me wrong, some of it still works, but they can't tell you how to fix the now.
What do you think you're more, I'm going to say passionate about, and it's not to box you in, but being a sales coach, business coach, or a business owner, like executing with your team there or helping other people external?
Just like my sales career, coaching people fell into my lap as well. I love coming to my office every day. It brings me joy. This is a second home for me. So I have a passion for this, and whether I continue wholesaling or try other things in my avenue, I am a guy who can't leave my office. I like to work, but I also like coaching. But coaching came to me because me and my brother do have a good awareness here in the Central Florida market. Yeah, it happened naturally. We had a lot of kids in the beginning of our careers come to us naturally as like, can you mentor us? And then now going to everybody has a meetup now in Orlando, but we go show face. Luckily, me and my brother now being the guys in Orlando, we get a lot of respect where people are like, you should go talk to those guys. So building our community became a small passion, and it kind of led to our community. And a lot of our guys are in our own markets. And that's one thing too that I don't like about this industry is everybody's like, get the heck out of my market. Don't talk to me. Go do it somewhere else. I actually found that more beneficial the opposite way. Yeah. But starting the community helped out, man. Like, I just helped out one guy. He's in Orlando who was struggling for the life of him. He was going broke. He couldn't pay back on some JV fees. He was doing some crazy stuff because like his family life was crazy. We helped him contract a deal. He made a six-figure check, $100,000 deal on assignment, and literally was like, you changed my whole life. Yeah, and like, that's so good. That's the crazy stuff, man. Like, and don't get me wrong, I love my students, but my students also do deals with me, which is also makes me money. It makes them money, and they get to learn and do everything. Yeah, I had a guy on this morning. He's like, dude, now I only JV with people inside of my community because if I'm going to help somebody, I want to spend my time and resources 100%. Helping those inside of my community specifically. Yeah. I love what you said about coming into the office and loving it. I think the thing that I appreciate, because I've been doing it for so long in sales training, sales directing, is I love just repeating the basics. It's so crazy. It's so easy to be a sales trainer because you're literally just reminding the people of all the fundamentals that we talked about 2 steps ago. And then you add more on and you add more. Now let's just go back. And like, I literally just put all my team leads into a room. I had a 30-minute meeting that I've had with them 10 times over the past 18 months, in some capacity or another. And it's just like, it's the fundamentals that run this thing, and knowing those fundamentals and be able to execute on your sales floor and being able to share that in a community like you're doing right now. It's the best. Yeah. I had 2 of my closers been with me for almost 5 years now. And we still do call recordings and I'll still pick their calls, and you need practice 100%. LeBron James looks at film every single day. There's not one game he goes home and is like, no, I'm good this week. He looks at the film and he's got to be coached on it. Let's talk about dispositions for a second, because I think that, you're one of those guys, you're so multi-versed, you could literally do any role of this particular industry.
Well, what are some mistakes other than, like not joining the school or, not leveraging guys like you, but what are some genuine mistakes people are making on the dispo side when they don't have enough money to subscribe to something fancy like Investor Lift or whatever? Like they're just getting started out. How are people screwing it up?
Yeah, man. Dispo and wholesaling is the key to your success. How do people screw it up? For me, my personal opinion, the reason why, and don't get me wrong, I am a sales coach through and through, but man, I love dispo because that's like true sales. Like now we're pushing the product.
Yeah.
But where people really screw up is they actually just don't understand numbers. They don't understand an investor's mindset. They don't understand how to build that same urgency. Like it is like true sales, and it's cutthroat. The good thing with sellers is that you can play this emotional roller coaster, but with buyers, man, like it's now or never. Like you're a flipper, you're on Investor Lift, you're buying deals, you're telling me buy 4 or 5 months. They all have their little tactics of, well, the rehab's a little bit too much. No, it ain't. You're going to lose a deal. Go call Bobby. Bobby, the guy that won next door. I'm going to call him next. I give you the head start. But where people mess up is comping. They don't understand what the heck the price should be sold for. I tell people all the time getting in this industry with like, people tell you can wholesale with no money down. The only way you really do that is by JVing people's deals.
Yep.
But you have to understand how to comp. So every day, every time I wake up in the morning, I do my routine, I'm on Investor Lift, I'm on Facebook. I'm looking for newbies with deals who leave meat on the bones. I'm fortunate enough that now my comping skills are so good, I can look at a house in Orlando and tell you what it's worth within 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But I know when people leave meat on the bones, and then I know what buyer I'm calling. So that's the key to dispo is understanding the market, what flippers are paying, how to comp the property to make sure it's a good deal, and then selling those deals. Every newbie leaves money on the bone because they want to make sure the deal sells. They're cool with the $5,000 assignment fee. There was a deal where there's one of these hard money lenders that we had where they sent us a deal. They made 10 grand. I made 30. And it drives people crazy. They're like, man, like I didn't think people could sell it. I have another buddy, David, another mentor. We have one of our rock star students. Same thing. He tells me, Anthony, I don't think this is a deal. What do you can sell it for? I go, that's a $50,000 deal. He goes, but who would buy that? I go, but that's the issue is you don't think it's a deal, but to somebody else, it's a deal. Why is it a deal? Well, it was a landlord buyer who bought that. It wasn't a flipper because he bought this cash sale at this price. Like people almost kill their own deal sometimes versus actually getting the opportunity to find somebody who will buy it.
Or what I appreciate the most about some of these guys who are the buyers out there, and I'm not trying to get, banned on YouTube or whatever, but a lot of them are known for being good hagglers.
Oh, for sure.
And good buyers and stuff, right? And so like you're calling somebody who's a multimillionaire who's got a large portfolio or a mid-sized portfolio. And yeah, buddy, I know you're a brand new wholesaler and you barely made your Zen call payment or Ready Mode payment this month. And so they have that like not imposter syndrome necessarily, but they don't understand what they're up against. And if you go back and listen to some of these calls, you're just getting bullied. Like you're getting bullied because you don't have confidence in that deal or you haven't learned that art of communication like you're talking about. And these buyers are actually the real salespeople because they will many times destroy the true cash guy who's got multiple properties. They're savvy. They're negotiating with banks. Yep. They're negotiating with contractors. They're negotiating with the cities. They're doing all this negotiation and you brand new wholesaler. So being able to have your numbers down and feel confident really is the difference between getting a good spread or even keeping the guy on the phone. These guys will hang up on you all day long, buddy. They'll hang up. They already got 5 other people sending them deals, blowing up their phones.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Even though I hate when buyers care about my assignment fees, I buy deals from wholesales, and I still care about their assignment fee. I'm like, man, he made 40 G's on me. It's terrible. And I wholesale. They're every flipper. I don't care what you do. I don't care if they say they don't care. We all care a little bit. We all want to make sure we get a deal too because they know you're making money.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
So your original journey started like 7 years ago. What would you say was what year was the first time you and your brother did your first like deal together?
Together as in wholesale deal or like a flip or something?
Let's go flip. Let's go the first property you guys ever acquired.
Man, that was probably almost 10 years ago. So like, what is that? Like 2014. Okay. I really had no opinion on it. My brother was just one of those guys where my brother's a gambler. He's like, he doesn't care. He understands that if he fails, he'll try it again. It is what it is. We'll make money anyways. So buying those first flips, man, my brother's very anal. He's on top of everything. He's very addicted to the process to make sure he doesn't get it wrong. So getting those first deals, man, it makes you nervous. You're using money out of your own account. You're trying to maybe get a loan for hard money. It makes you nervous. But I think I've been blessed to have such a killer as a brother that taking these risks has been relatively easy. I didn't want to say I had too much fear going into this industry, because what actually happened is like the first like 5 years of our journey, we really didn't do nothing. We just partied our faces off. We were like, oh, we made 20, 30 grand. We made this, we made 50K. Let's go party, wasted. Like we actually, people ask me what would I do in the beginning is I'd buy way more properties. But we just goofed off. But then we knew that we had a well-oiled machine, and then we started hiring people that we always knew the money was coming. So like taking the risk to do the flip actually wasn't a big issue. It made us nervous because it's like, what are we going to make? How are we going to do it? We found out this last year that we've been paying too much for contractors. And that's something we've been working on towards Q4. Like we're doing a rehab right now here in Orlando. My brother in the beginning was like, this is an $80,000 rehab. Luckily, we found a strategic partner on this one to kind of guide us through the repairs. We ended up only spending like 45, and the house looks amazing. So we'll make more money on that deal. So we have learning stuff. We're mainly like buying old people, like subject to creative finance, but we're trying to get more involved in the flipping stuff. We usually do like the easier stuff, like this is like a high end flip. So there's learning curves. What the risk is, like we did one a year ago. We lost 30 grand. Yeah, and it was a nightmare. But it's learning.
Well, that's what I was actually going to hone in on. You kind of answered the question, but take a real, a thoughtful, if you don't mind. It's like it's 10 years experience seeing deals go to other people and keep cherry picking some for yourself.
Yeah.
If you could go back literally to like, let's just say even 5 years ago, 5 years, okay, I can go back in time. I can give myself not sales advice, but investment advice. What would you do differently in the past 5 years on the investment strategies that you and your brother had?
Right off the bat, any Orlando or Central Florida deal that we had that had a $30,000 assignment fee or more, I would have kept. Yeah, I would have kept because I would have crushed it flipping. Yep. And if I didn't crush it flipping, the equity on that house would have been expedient. It would have been ginormous. Like just my house went up like 300 grand. I bought my house in COVID. So everything that had a big spread, I would have kept it, would have made a larger spreads. I would have wholetailed more. I would have done more innovations. I would have flipped it. Instead, we were always like the quick nickel guys. It was like, let's just make the 40 grand and move on. We got marketing to spend. We got to pay people. Let's boom, boom, boom. Versus like, what this would have took me like 3 extra months and I would have made 80. I should have done that.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. I know I consider you like a young OG. Like you're younger than me, but you have way more real estate experience than myself. I know I'm asking you to kind of look in a crystal ball that doesn't exist, but what do you think about 5 years from now? Like with everything going on, do you think that you would 5 years from now give yourself that same advice today? Or what do you think's going to happen?
That's a good question. I think no matter what, in 5 years, you're always going to kick yourself in the butt. But I think knowing my goals that's coming up, I think with the election, of course, I think it's time to ramp up. It's time to buy everything. You have to. I think we got to take advantage. I think there's going to be a switch. I mean, Bitcoin just hit 103 today. Like things are going to get crazy, and I think in a good way, hopefully knock on wood. But going back, I think right now we're like, let's buy some stuff and like throw it on the market, wholesale. Let's try to make some more money out of these deals to get more squeeze for the juice. That maybe it's going to be a thing in 5 years where it's like, well, maybe I should have DSCR'd them, did the Burr method or something like that, where I should have just kept them all because now the rates went up again and now the houses are worth more. So maybe something like that. Luckily, we're also doing self-storage. So maybe it's going to be like, hey, maybe I shouldn't have passed up on so many of the smaller deals, stuff like that. So, yeah.
And for you, from an education standpoint, when you want to learn like, hey, I want to do this creative deals or DSCR, and I'm trying to forecast, where are you going for a guy like yourself who's already established? Where are you going to learn more? How are you figuring out, okay, I wanted to, because I know you guys like brought innovations in. And so that was a newer type strategy. So like, where are you going to consume content or education, et cetera?
I think there's a lot of guys in the industry. It's one of those things where right now my brother handles all commercial and I do all the residential. I don't really see us leaving these two niches only because it's one of those things like there's this guy, Zach, I think he's got an HGTV show, as far as names like Zach Ventures, where Alex is the kind of guy where he's like self-storage everything. Like I'm going to build my wealth on that. But then this guy's worth like 100 million and it's only single family.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those things like if we can just be super strategic and know what we know and target that in. It's like guys who do like land entitlements and stuff like that. Like there's guys who are geniuses that make hundreds of millions of dollars because they're experts in that one field. Ryan Pineda put it on his last podcast really well. It's like everybody has like their diamond tunnel and you're just digging your diamonds. But what happens is when you're digging those diamonds, another tunnel opens. Yep. And this is kind of where distractions happen, where you're like, are there diamonds in there? There probably is, but how far does it take me to get to those diamonds?
Yep.
So I think for me and my brother, I think for now, it's going to be like residential and storage units. I think for us, we're just going to try to flip a little bit more, be a little bit more strategic on like rental properties. We do have good connections with like hard money where we can get properties 100% financed. And then of course we have private lenders as well. So those help us keep a lot of stuff. We're really big into like pad splits to try to grow our rental income versus just doing long-term rent. So I think just really acquiring more, staying in our field. We're actually going to try to pull back 2025 to just core markets. We did get really bananas these last 2 years where we kind of want to be the guys of Central Florida, which I think a lot of the guys that we know the same guys in like California who are doing like ridiculous numbers, but all they know is San Diego and LA, where it's like, even though we have the respect here, we don't have the portfolio here.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I see some of these other asset classes, and I'm like you. It's what are the diamonds? And you hear stories, right? Like the stories that you hear in the two asset classes that I've really been so interested in that I haven't really done anything. But I like not mobile home parks, but I see the capacity. I love mobile homes on land, and I know it's a smaller spread. But I just love those because I know how many people are going to PropStream or wherever to pull their data, and they're skipping that. And so there's so much competition on this other thing. And the same with land. I got a kid that's in Southwest Florida, the Charlotte County, I think is what it's called, but Port Charlotte area, Punta Gorda. And he is He is my most efficient dials to leads campaign that I have nationwide because he's calling grandma or whoever it is who lives in the north, who bought this speculative piece of land in 1976 that whose husband's passed now. And they're like, yeah, I've been paying taxes on it for the past 40 years. Yeah, sure. Yeah, give me $5,000 for it. And then he's going and flipping it. So it's really crazy. I guess what you're saying is the amount of opportunities that are out there, just specialize in one.
Yeah, I think there's people in those niches. Again, I'm envious of those guys, but it's also the same thing as, could I do it? I know I could, but it's just building another tunnel. That's the thing.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, cool. So let's talk about real quick, man, for guys. And again, I want to reiterate to everybody who's watching this, when it comes to authenticity in the REI space, I think it is the biggest gap that I've ever seen in it. Dude, I knew nothing about real estate till 5 years ago. I came into it and I was just like, cool. And I went to my first wet seminar and I was like, oh, this is great. And then I couldn't believe that they were scheduled 90 days out, like every 90 days. And then there was like another one coming up. I was like, how are we taking this information and having time to implement it? Like, why is everybody coming back and getting more things and more things and more things and more things? And so it's what I love about you is because if you follow you're literally doing it. These are the things that I do. These are the things that I do well, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. If you met my brother, he's in San Diego right now at a mastermind.
He's a junkie.
He's a junkie.
He's addicted to damn these things.
He's addicted. I wish I could travel as much as this guy. But it's one of those things that I think you have to be the right person. So a lot of people who come into my school, and my school is relatively low ticket, but a lot of people who come in, they always have this fear of like, what am I going to get out of it? And what I tell most people that it's like, it's really not me. It's not me. It's you. Like we have this local event called CFRI, Central Florida Real Estate Investors.
Yep.
Dude, I've seen the same people there for 7 years who are still trying to get their first deal. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're paying $200 a year to eat the free pizza here every Thursday. The key to any success, and I don't care if you didn't graduate, you didn't even go to kindergarten, or you have a master's degree. Everything's speed of implementation. Like you have to just start calling people. You have to do something, whether you have time or you have money or whatever route you're going to take. You just got to do it. The good thing for us about going to these meetups, and we spend hundreds of thousands every year for Alex to have vacations. These things, Alex goes, but he comes back with a game plan.
Yeah.
So that's the difference is that like, he's like, I heard somebody do this. Let's try it out. Let's do it. If it works, it doesn't, whatever. But the thing is like Novations, for example, like Alex would have to beg me to look at a video of Novations. I'm like, it doesn't work. Like I'm not doing it. But then I finally, without my brother, somebody told me about it. I was like, all right, let me look at it. And then this damn guy's like, yeah, my average spread went from 15 to 67,000. I'm like, shut up, let me see. and then like when you see the process, the guy's like, the process doesn't change. Like it's literally you're telling them, you'll give them what they want. And then I'm like, okay. And then now, split implementation. Now that I understood it and I was like, I accepted it. I was like, I'll do it. Literally got a deal within like the first month and a half, and then we made like 47,000.
I love it.
But if I didn't do it, if I was always the guy that was analytical, that had to think about it and say, well, you know, what's my contract like? Oh, do I use a AIF or a POA? Like, who cares? Just do it. If you mess it up, you mess it up. But at least you talked to the seller. You went through the pitch. You got him to sign it. Okay, sure, the title company won't accept it, whatever. Or you close it and you made 50 racks. The next one's easier. Your first deal is always the hardest.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I love that about you guys, and I do appreciate that about your brother because I know him well. And I think that where people struggle is they get shiny object syndrome, and then they can't let go of the spinning dreidel. And it's like, no, you got to let go, bro. Like if you go and check in and look at it, and that's what I think so funny about the CRM space in the REI world is like all it takes is one new, and it's all like a wrap to some other program. I don't want to go too deep on it, but anyways, it's the same turd just being polished a different way in so many things. But if you're looking for authenticity and you're looking for somebody who's actually doing real deals, you need to follow Q the Closer. He lives up to the name. The Q stands for Quezada, but Q the Closer. How do people find out about your school community, my man? And what do they get inside of the school community other than going to look at your head?
It's a shiny head, baby. Yeah, everything's pretty much on IG. So all the links are in there to join Wholesale Wealth. Wholesale Wealth is a big community. I'm not the kind of guy that's going to sell you a course. There's a course already built into it, but it's really, you get one-on-ones with me in the beginning. So once you sign up, I want to know about your process, what you're going through, whether you've got no deals, you're afraid to make offers, or you got an established business and maybe you're trying to hire your first person. Usually I'm going after the guys who are relatively new or trying to build wealth. So it's called Wholesale Wealth for a reason. The goal for you guys is to start wholesaling, make some money, make it an operation, and then go build wealth. Because again, none of us are going to wholesale and talk to these crazy sellers to retire on. Yeah. No, we wholesale to build active income, so that way our active income can buy passive income. So my goal is to help the newbies out. Let's get you guys operating. Let's get you a list. Let's get you calling. Let's make some offers. Let's learn how to dispo. And then after that, okay, cool. You're doing it yourself. What does the hiring process looks like? How do you get an acquisition agent? How do you pay them? How do you do this? And then finally, I have a couple guys who are in that point where they're like, all right, how do I get out of this? Yeah. How to get out of the rat race. And that's kind of like the next level to it. But you'll get all the information. You get contracts, you get agreements, you get our wireframe, you get access to me, you get my personal cell phone. But it's a good community. You get access to the community. That's why we like it on school. We have guys in our group where they're like, everyone was trying to buy a list. Well, again, I don't care about competition. You have a call center. Everybody calls the same list. I don't care what market you're in. We're all pulling from the same people. We all do this, but everyone's like, oh, the sacred list. I go, dude, all you guys are complaining about a list. I already bought that list. I go, why don't you all split a list so that way it's cheaper and you just call? I go, you're going to talk to different sellers, I promise. And you're probably going to talk to the same, but one's not going to like you and he's going to like this guy. Yep. But our community is very involved where everybody's trying to help themselves out. I have guys who've gone on appointments together with each other because they're nervous and they're like, will you go with me so we can do it together? And they both learn. So I like to make sure that even the community is kind of treated like my office. Like everybody's got to be strong and willing to work together.
The thing I like about the school communities, man, particularly this one, because I know you well and I know the business, is that you need to have these blinders on. There's so many different little courses and this and that and this and that. And what ends up happening is people act like whores and they're just bouncing around into all these little individual little places. And what you end up not doing is being able to execute and you get that distraction. And for people who out there who don't belong or are looking to that level up, I like it. How much is it a month?
It's literally $199 a month.
They couldn't even talk to me on the phone for 100. So like that's beautiful that they get all that. So anyways, dude, man, I'm a big fan. I'm a big supporter. I love watching your content. Keep on ripping the deals, big fat deals. Keep on rocking and rolling over there. Sure. And then cue the closer it is, man. I really appreciate you coming out here and taking the time and kind of chit-chatting. I'm sure we'll collab on a bunch of deals and a bunch of other stuff here in the future as well.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you for having me. Appreciate you.
All right. You're very welcome, brother. Talk to you. Peace.